you can revise that. You can revise bib 2 also, or your proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. That's fine, Janelle. I know. I got that. Okay. So we talked about your counter on Friday. Today I told you, and this is like a really quick thing. You might have heard of Monroe's motivated sequence before. A lot of times it's used with arguments. Some teachers use it in speech. If you're taking English 115, this might be a familiar concept to you. But basically, it's just the way you want to set up an argument. Now, yes, we've been working on setting up an argument all semester, or how this is going to be, but this is basically just saying, these are like checkpoints. Do I have this check? Do I have this check? And as long as you have these 5 points, I have a full organized argument. Now, the 5 steps in that argument are attention, right? And we'll talk about each one of these, and they're not really complicated. Need, that you're establishing a need, something needs to be done, right? That's where we're going with that, something should or should not, your thesis statement. Satisfaction, action, remember you're coming up with a solution here, and a visualization. All right, so we'll talk about them, and they're really simple. These are just little things that you're going to say, make sure I have this. That attention step is basically your hook. All right, 1 sentence. Remember, you're opening this argument with something that's going to be an attention getter, right? Ask a question, maybe a quote, a story. We've been talking about this all semester, with hooks and how, you want to start an argument. So that's nothing new to you, but you just want to make sure that that's on your little checklist of, do I have a creative opening? All right. Am I not just, like blah, 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 blah. Right. And I'm not saying, because you've done a lot of research, and I'm not saying blah, but you want to grab that attention from the beginning. All right. So make sure that whatever that opening line is, it's something that makes your readers sit up and say, okay, I'm ready to read this. Step 2 is your need step. All right. And there's a whole bunch of stuff written on this PowerPoint. However, the most important part is you are establishing a need. The death penalty should be a thing, or, however they're going to word it. This should be legalized throughout the United States because blank, blank, and blank. All right. That's my need. Something needs to be done. I'm telling you that my topic is the death penalty. I'm telling you it needs to be done. And here's why. All right. Here's the 3 things that I say why it needs to be done. And a lot of that, like I said, you'll see on your comments on your thesis statement. I kind of really tried to spend some time on those and make sure that you were, really down pat with that. So, take that advice into consideration, and that will establish your need. You want that should not statement. You want those 3 specific things why, and you want to make sure that your audience sees that this is your stance. If I say something should not be done, then obviously I'm saying I'm against it. If I say it should,
our thesis statement should go?
Well, I'm sorry?
Is this where our thesis statement should go?
Yes. Yeah. So step 1 being that attention step, that's your opening hook. And then you have your intro. And at the very end of your intro is going to be that need step. I'm putting my thesis there. I'm saying that something should be done. Here's the 3 things. And these are the 3 things I'm going to break down in those body paragraphs now. Does that make sense? Step 3 is your satisfaction step. All right. And this is basically that you're saying, here's what's going on out there. These are your body paragraphs. You want to make sure that you're giving explanations. You want to make sure that you're giving quotes, that you're backing up what you're saying. Right. This is kind of like the meat of your argument, those 3 body paragraphs that are going to come after that intro. I gave you these 3 reasons. Now I'm going to break down these 3 reasons, show you how they fit, why they're important. Here's what others are saying about it, because I have my quotes in there to back it up, and paraphrases. All right, don't rely on all quotes, kind of paraphrase too. All right, this is for you to use that research. This is where you're going to put a bulk of that research that you've done all semester, other than what you've used in your background. Step 4 Your counter argument. This is going to be body paragraph number 5. Because remember, this is going to be a 6-paragraph essay, this final one. Your intro is 1, 2, 3, 4 are your 3 body paragraphs, breaking down those points. Number 5 is your counter. We talked about counter on Friday. You want to choose 3 things, and it does not have to be the 3 things of your thesis. It could be, if you want to say, well, this is why people say it against this point. But as long as you have 3 reasons that people go against what it is that you're saying. With that death penalty, some people do not want the death penalty legalized. Why? Well, one group that might not want to see it legalized would be the family of the perpetrator, right? It's not our fault that our son committed murder, but we don't want to lose him. Why is that? We're a family. We'd be grieving just as much if our son was put to death as the family that was grieving because he killed them. All right. So that's one group that probably would be against the death penalty, right? Because their son, child, daughter, whatever, relative, person they knew would be the person being put to death. Another reason that somebody might go against the death penalty would be that they're just against capital punishment. Doesn't matter who kills. So one wrong doesn't make a right. 2 wrongs don't make a right. Right. So yes, this person killed somebody and that was wrong, but putting them to death or having the say to put them to death is just as wrong. Killing 2 people doesn't make either one of them come back, doesn't make that victim come back. That could be another reason. So make sure that you choose 3, whatever 3 you would like. Make sure that you find some evidence out there. That's why I told you to kind of gather up that evidence as you were going along to find at least one source or 2 that has that counterpoint in it, and do that turn against, turn back model. All right. If you get stuck with that, the video is up there from Friday's class. I posted that. And also you have an example paper that we looked at, and I'm going to post that today after class. I was waiting because I wanted to show you the conclusion of it. But use those words. While there are those that feel the death penalty is not the right way to go, and then turn back to you. This is not true. This is not, or while people feel the 2 wrongs don't make a right, this isn't necessarily a good way to think. All right. Turn against, turn back, and then explain why that's not a good way to think. Well, because, the person that is being put to death did kill somebody, and that deserves a punishment, whatever it is that you want to say. All right. But you want to have 3 of those in that paragraph. So that counter is going to be a little bit longer, because you're going to do that statement, you're going to prove why, and then you're also going to put some kind of a quote. Remember, everything that you are saying wants to be backed up with some kind of a source, a quote, a paraphrase, something like that. All right, so you're going to have 3 of those in that counter paragraph. Finally, your conclusion. We didn't talk a lot about conclusion yet. Doesn't have to be overly long, all right, but not really short, but not overly long either. But that conclusion is what we would call the action step. This is where you're going to ask your audience to do something. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go do this, depending on your topic. Remember, this was geared towards an audience. If you were talking about nursing burnout and the nursing shortage and something needed to be done about it, and your audience is structured around administrators because they're the ones that can do something, what do you want them to do? All right. This is where you're going to put that solution. All right. Some of you in your background paper kind of went more towards adding some solution into that. And you'll see that I'll mark that and say, no, this is solution. Save this for your argument. You don't want to go solution on here. You just wanted to give background. So if you see that, now you know that I'm saying this is something that you want to move into that other paper, that this is something you want to bring up and talk about. This is part of what you want to do to solve this problem. All right. So be on the lookout for those kind of comments, because I know I left a couple so far on some of your papers. But what do you want them to do? What is the solution for your issue? How can it end? If you're saying that it should be legalized because of these reasons, the death penalty, how is that going to come about? How are you going to, you just say, oh, it should be legalized? Well, yes. Okay. Yeah, obviously you're restating what you said earlier, but what is the end result of that? Or what do you think is the end result of that? Will it bring justice? That victims' families are entitled to this justice. So that's part of your solution. That they need that justice, and that this is a way of giving that to them. It's a closure for them for losing a loved one unexpectedly. Right? That can be part of what that action step is, that solution. And then finally, your paper is going to end with a particular statement. All right, this is called the visualization step. All right, your very last statement is your first statement, your last statement are the most powerful statements that you can write in an argument. All right, so that's why you want a good hook to bring them in. You gave them all this information, and that last statement is going to be, here's my parting words. Here's what I want you to walk away and think about. And you can do that in either a positive spin or a negative spin, depending on how you want it to hit your audience. And in a sense, if you were doing it on a positive spin, and I'll give you an example, this is just kind of what would the world be like if this problem was solved? All right. Or what will the world be like if this problem is not solved, if it's allowed to continue? Depending on the issue that you have is going to be how you're going to set this up. Now, I wanted to show you a paper. That's why I didn't post it yet. An example paper, student paper from a couple semesters ago. And what I mean by that visualization statement, that very final sentence, do you want them to walk away saying, hey, if we take care of this, it'll be a better place, or hey, not taking care of this is going to make the world a worse place? In her case, we looked a little bit at this on Friday. It's about music education, right? Well, she ends it. She gives her conclusion here, right? Gives her a little bit of a solution to it. Need to reevaluate budget plans, things like that, in order to keep music in schools. And then she ends on this visualization note, providing every student in the United States of America with the opportunity to formally study music at their school has the potential to open doors for them that lead to higher academic achievement, more complex thinking, a greater sense of self, a strong group of friends, a healthier lifestyle. So she's saying, she's leaving it on a positive note. You don't have to write that many things, but she's leaving it on, hey, if we do this, kids are going to turn out better. They're going to be more well-rounded. They're going to be healthier. They're going to be, more well-adjusted, those kind of things. Now, this kind of a topic fits well with that kind of a positive spin, because if you didn't do it, I don't know, are we going to have a bunch of criminals? I don't know. Probably not. So there's really no way to leave this one on a negative spin, really. But suppose you were doing something like global warming or something that's a little bit more serious. If you wanted to leave that on a negative spin, you could say something like, ignoring the signs, ignoring the signs, the devastation that global warming is already producing to the planet or creating on the planet will create an even more desolate future, right, for humans and animals alike. And I could leave it like that. So I'm telling you, if something's not done, it's going to get worse. Doesn't have to be really in depth, but just, hey, if things aren't taken care of, it'll get bad. It's going to continue to get bad. So depending on the topic you have, that's where you want to go with that spin, leaving that final statement on either a positive note or a negative note, right? And that's basically how you're going to set up. That's what Monroe's motivated sequence is. It's just like a little kind of like checklist for you to make sure that you have everything that should be included in an argument. That hook, that thesis statement, that you're giving plenty of support to those body paragraphs, that you have a good counter, that you have a solution, and that you have that final visualization. What kind of parting words do you want to leave your audience with? All right, questions? So with that said, we will at your rubric. Okay. So basically what I give you here, all right, I try to make I don't like to get all complicated with a lot of instructions. You know what the purpose is. You've been building this all semester. You have a good thesis, following my comments, because going to take what I said and kind of adjust where you need to. You're going to be using APA. Make sure you have a creative title. All right, that working title that you've been working with for the past couple of papers. Don't put argument of, just give it that creative title. You don't have to tell me background of or argue. You don't have to do that. And follow this particular outline, which also follows the same Monroe's motivated sequence. Your intro, you're going to give brief background. Remember, you already gave a lot of background in that background paper. You're just introducing the problem itself. Okay, you're not getting into all this is what happened in the past and this and that, just introducing the problem itself in a few sentences. With that creative opening line, you're going to have that thesis. You're going to have your 3 body paragraphs with your claims, good topic sentences. Here's the first part of my thesis. Here's the second part of my thesis. Here's the third part of my thesis broken down. All right, give your explanation, your supporting evidence. I want to stress again, make sure that you are using more paraphrasing than quoting. All right, when you get into your upper classes, you don't want a lot of quotes. Yes, you want that stuff. You want that information from your sources, and you do want to cite it, but you want it more in your own words. When you use a quote, it should only be a really, really powerful quote that, yeah, I need this word for word because this makes, this is a really important thing to know, word for word. Most of it you can put into your own words. Read it. I like this part. Put it in your own words, and then put Smith 2020 or the last name of the author and the year. All right, so most of it should be paraphrased.
We took the advantage.
The counter argument. Make sure that you have 3 of them, the turn against and turn back. All right, we have that example up there with the paper. We have the example on, somebody's got something going here. Who is that? Let's see on here, who's not muted. Okay. Make sure that you have 3 of them. While there are those that do this is not true, or while this may be, while social media is becoming more popular and, influencers have a lot of pull on today's society, you can't say that's not true. It is, right? So you don't want to say, you want to use those words. This is not necessarily, a good thing. All right. So make sure whatever it is that you do that turn against, turn back, that you're not just, it's not true, because some things are, but you could kind of, they're true, but it's not necessarily good. It doesn't make it right just because it's true. And then explain why your point is better. Why is that it's not right? And then that conclusion that's going to have your solution and your visualization. All right. You're going to have your works, your reference page. Make sure it's references, not works cited, not bibliography, references. It's another thing I'm seeing on the papers. With your sources, only the sources used in this paper. All right. Even if you paraphrase, you got to put, anything that you're putting in parentheses saying I took from somewhere, paraphrase or quoted, you want in this paper. Alphabetical order by last name, all right, of author. If there is no author, then you're going to go by the title, the first letter of the title. That's how it would be in that alphabetical order. And then the year right after the title. All right, just like you would have the year after the author's last name. And what else? Anything else? Make sure you have your headers. That's another thing I'm seeing a little bit on the bibs. Make sure that you running head on that first page with the title in all caps. And then from then on, from page 2 on, just the title in all caps. Remember to click that different first page like we did in the beginning of the semester, so that you don't have that term running through all pages. You just want the title on all pages other than the first page. The final day for upload is going to be May 2nd. So you have like 3 weeks for the argument, all right, for these 6 paragraphs. After May 2nd, I cannot accept anything because your grades have to be in by the 4th, all right? Because technically May 2nd would be our exam day, and this is our final exam. You know, we're not having an exam in English 1 or 2, so I have 48 hours from that time to get your grades, your final grades in. So nothing can come in late after the 2nd. It's going to close at 11:59, and that's going to be that. All right. Questions about anything? I mean, you're all prepared. I know you're all prepared for this. You've been working all semester with all this info. You've all been doing well. So you're all ready to write this. You are. Okay. All right. You don't have any work for this week other than when you want to start your argument and start, you know, at least making an outline for yourself or something, you can do that. Be on the lookout for your comments. Please take my comments about your thesis important. You know, they're really important there. You want to make sure it's a argumentative thesis and not informative. And I will see you on Friday, April 22nd. All right. Have a nice Easter.